What's up everyone, Theo here coming at you with another casual healing commentary video of one of my weekly keys. This week we're looking at a plus 18 Freehold. This first pull in Freehold has to be one of my favorites to do in Season 2, though it can be pretty deadly, especially on fortified weeks. I usually pop my Convoke pretty early to make sure I don't fall behind, and then save my Flourish for one of the Enforcer's shouts. This should give you more than enough healing to deal with the damage coming out. The only other mechanic you really need to look out for is the Mastiff's Enrage. Especially on fortified weeks, this can one-shot your tank, so you want to soothe this as soon as possible.
Afflicted.
The final trash pull before the first boss can also be pretty nasty. This is a smaller version of the first one that we did with 2 Enforcers and 2 Mastiffs to worry about. However, you won't have Bloodlust here to help out, so this can actually be a little bit harder of a pull. Make sure your group is hotted up before Enforcers shout, and don't be afraid to use your Convoke or Flourish here again. On Fortified, you shouldn't need these cooldowns on the first boss, so this is no time to be stingy with your cooldowns. Again, soothe the dogs, and you'll be all set.
Afflicted.
The first boss is pretty straightforward. Just dodge the boss's charge in the first phase and top off anyone that gets shot at.
Afflicted.
When he transitions, the same basic principle applies. Look out for Sharkbait's charge and be ready to heal and dispel anyone that gets shot at and has the debuff. This week's affixes were Afflicted and Raging. Not the worst affixes, but definitely things that impact us as a healer. There are many times throughout this dungeon where you need to pick between dispelling a debuff on someone and dispelling an afflicted mob. It's not really an issue here on this boss, but you'll see a few places it gets a little scary later on in the dungeon. Luckily, my group helped me out a lot with dispels. This is a lifesaver as a Resto Druid because we don't really have an easy way to heal up the second afflicted mob without wasting our Swiftmen cooldown, and that never feels good as a Resto Druid. The next trash mob that's a little bit tricky are these ones that you fight up here on the balcony. While all you really need to do is dodge their mechanics, you want to be careful not to get blocked in by your party. I usually try to run through the group and stand far enough back to make sure that everyone has more than enough space to dodge the sea sprouts.
Charging, move.
The next couple of packs can also be a little bit deadly. There are 2 main mechanics that you need to worry about. The first are the traps that the Rat Riders will cast. These are pretty simple to dodge, but if you do get hit by them, they leave a nasty dot while you're rooted. Luckily, if you get hit by them as a druid, you can just shapeshift out of it and it will remove not only the root, but also the accompanying dot. However, if any of your allies get hit, they will need immediate attention. The next mechanic that you need to worry about is Frost Blast coming from the Brine Scales. This is a must interrupt cast, especially on fortified weeks. Even if you don't spec into your interrupt, you can help out the group by using your incapacitating roar. You'll see at one point that I do tunnel a little bit too much on trying to help out with this, and we end up missing an inflicted mob. A little bit of an oopsie on my part, but nothing that we're not able to recover from. The second boss, or more accurately bosses, are surprisingly simple, though this fight always seems to give Pugs trouble. The only real danger comes from Eudora, which is why she is always the first one that your group will kill. When she starts to do her main ability where she shoots across the room, make sure you run to her ASAP and get behind her. With Cat form, this shouldn't be a problem, and you can always help out the rest of your group with Stampeding Roar. While ideally your group should be able to dodge this no problem, you never know with Pugs, so keep an eye out for anyone that gets hit and start immediately triaging them with Life Bloom, Regrowths, and Swiftmens. Don't be afraid to use Bark Skin, Convoke, and Flourish as well if needed. This is really the only major damage event during the whole fight, so there is no reason to save your cooldowns if it means saving someone who messes up to this mechanic.
Target you.
Once Eudora is dead, the second boss is pretty easy. Our tank actually decides that he's so easy that he decides he's going to pull in an extra pack with him. While a little fancy, it's not something I'd recommend doing in a pug, but what do I know? I'm just the healer. On this pack, I usually like to run ahead to start the RP before the third boss. I end up popping Convoke and making sure my group's hotted up before I get there. I even give them a Flourish to help increase the healing. However, I do end up needing to spend a little extra time in the arena to deal with an afflicted mob that spawned. Not ideal, and we do end up losing a couple of DPS as I fall behind, but it's nothing that we can't recover from. Ludwig before the third boss is a pretty uneventful fight. On fortified weeks, his shells will one-shot most DPS, so there really isn't much healing to do. I usually just switch into Boomkin form and spend most of my time DPSing him. The third boss here is pretty annoying, though the mobility of Resto Druids and our ability to cast instant spells make it pretty easy for us to kite the sharks. Whenever I do this boss, I do make an effort to get the sharks onto me and then slowly kite them towards the blood puddles. This way our DPS can spend more time doing damage and less time running away from sharks.
Watch your step.
The damage pattern for this boss is overall pretty annoying to deal with. Since it really depends on how well your DPS moves out of the way, it's pretty unpredictable. Try to keep some hots rolling on your DPS at all times to make things a little bit easier when you have to recover. Also, Convoke is a lifesaver on this fight since you're able to cast it while moving, and it can really help you get out of a hairy situation.
Afflicted.
Watch your feet.
The final trash packs here are also pretty rough. I would even go as far as to say that this is probably the hardest part of the dungeon on fortified weeks. We have a return of the sea sprouts that need to be dodged. This can be pretty hard if you are stuck on the bridge like I am here. Also, we have a new cast here to worry about, Thundering Squall, which is a huge amount of damage. This is another thing that should be interrupted, and if it isn't, people will die like you see here.
Afflicted.
Finally, we have these enforcers that put a pretty nasty healing reduction debuff on your tank. This should normally be dispelled off immediately. You'll see here that I do use my dispel on an afflicted affix a few times. This mistake does almost lead to me letting the tank die, though we are able to barely make it through. The final boss can be a little tricky to heal, but it becomes much easier once you understand the timing of his mechanics. He essentially has 4 abilities: a bleed effect that he puts on a random target, a tornado that needs to be dodged, a cannon barrage that needs to be moved away from others, and an ad that will fixate and explode on a random target.
Watch your step.
The tricky part of this fight comes in phase 2, where instead of targeting a single person with his abilities, he targets everyone in the group. The worst overlap happens immediately after he transitions to phase 2, which happens at 60% health. Here, he will target everyone with the debuff and then do his cannon barrage on the whole group. This is annoying because you need to heal the whole group while moving out with the barrage. This is the perfect time to use Convoke. If you pre-hot your group before, Convoke should be more than enough to heal this point.
Afflicted.
On Tyrannical, you can always send Flourish if it's needed. If you make it past this point, the rest of the overlaps are pretty manageable to heal until you get the same overlap again in Phase 3. As long as you pre-hot your group, this should be manageable to get through.
Watch your step.
And that's about it for Freehold. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like the video if you made it this far, subscribe for some more casual healing content, and I'll see you in the next video.